as I get above 4 watts per kilogram, my camera changes automatically, which helps me with seeing who's behind me on the sprint. And so I know how much harder I got to push when I roll forward. But it doesn't stay that long. All right, welcome to another New York City race. We are in stage 2 of the Cityscapes Park Perimeter Loop, and once again, I'm working towards my King of Staten Island. Wouldn't be Staten Island, it'd be Manhattan. Island of Manhattan, for those who actually know, who've been there. But the King of Manhattan, King of New York City, King of Park Perimeter and Central Park. I have had a blast on this course. I'm probably one of the few people you will come across that actually enjoys the New York routes. I'm not a huge fan of the glass roads, but they're just hard enough to really make you work. And the climbs are, I've set a few good PRs, 3-4 minutes up the climbs, various climbs, but it is hard. It's, you work at it. So I'm in the 510 to 650 group today. Again, I started, so the last series that we did, the McCurry May, I started in the, in the group that I was in for ZRS, and then I ended up leveling up, and so I rode in that group, and ultimately what ended up happening is my final result, while you get the GC overall, if you filter it by your ZRS, the times don't match up. And the times don't match up because depending on how many races you've done within that ZRS range, then you end up split between categories. So my last one was split between the 400s and the 500s. Now I'm at 5. I think when I started this race, I was in the 530s, something like that. And so, I did my best to stay in the, band that I'm in for the races. So this is the Sunday of Father's Day, June 15th. For those, I know a lot of times I'll get asked either on Facebook or comments, what time the race was, so other people can identify, whether or not they were in that race. I do need to make a sauce add-in that will basically show the time, and so that way people know. Because I do the same thing. I look at people's races and I'm like, I see I see the race title, I see the race that they were in. I start looking for familiar names to see whether or not I was there. And if I don't see my name or I don't see familiar names, then I'll look them up on their companion app and find out what time they raced so I can get a better understanding of when they race. Because, again, some of the, especially, a lot of people that post race videos, I'd love to know when they race, so if I ever come across them, I can give them a shout out, but also I know what to expect. I like doing my recon work. And so as we start getting around the perimeter here, you see BMTR, a guy from BMTR with green socks, just kind of pushed up a little bit. I've got to say, BMTR, I like the new outfit. I like the new drip, as the young kids say. I'm really not that old, but as the kids say, I like the outfit. Their change looks awesome, and so this time around we are, we headed out the pen a little bit hard, as usual. Per normal Zwift races. I heard a pretty popular YouTuber. I'm not going to name him, but I heard a pretty popular YouTuber say that that most races don't start off pretty hard. I think most of his races probably don't start off really hard, because people that race with him also say that they go out hard. I think if you've ever seen a Zwift race, especially one of mine, we go out pretty hard. We go out, 400 or 500 watts initially for the first few seconds, and then it starts to slow down a bit. But this time around, we were just cruising. We went out hard, 400 watts for a minute, not even for a minute, for like 10 seconds or something, and then, the pace slowed down pretty quickly. I think everybody was anticipating this first hill, and that's kind of what you see right now, is we're all bunched up anticipating this hill. So I'm going to jump forward to when we get to the initial uh, riser for that hill. And so as we're getting there, one thing you'll notice is my camera view will change. And so it right now I have a sauce mod that is set up for, it's a custom mod that is set up so that way anytime my power goes over 4 watts per kilogram, it changes to the rear view. And every 5 minutes, if my camera view hasn't changed, it will go to the angled rear facing. I'm gonna play with what camera views it uses because, as you see now, I'm in the rear facing. I'm doing above 4 watts per kilogram, 5.6 right now, just to stay with the group. I'm on the SL8 with the NB89s. I figured the performance of those rims would be better suited for me to for the sprint versus focusing on the climb, on the climbing efforts. There is enough climbing efforts to where I could have warranted the NV78s, but this time around I just stuck with the 8.9s. And so as we start to hit the top of the hill, you see I'm back in my normal camera view in camera 1. Now the reason why that is because the camera view changes to camera 4 for 15 seconds, and then it will switch back after those 15 seconds to camera 1, and then it has an idle timer, so that way it waits another 30 seconds before changing again. So that way it's not constantly just jumping back and forth. So as we get over this hill, you'll see, they're starting to distance me a little bit. Now, I don't know if, so here's my theory behind this, because I raced this race and I was getting frustrated by the end because I kept getting dropped on the hills. Now, my weight has gone up. After my vacation, my 5 days off the bike, I put on quite a bit of weight. Probably a lot of food weight, a lot of water weight, but enough to where I increased my weight in Zwift. And so I would have thought, hey, the downhills would be easy. They'd be a little bit easier to keep up. But my theory is that all the people on the Trons were basically off the front. And so I'm thinking the Trons are flying off the front, pulling everybody else behind them. And that is making the group roll faster. So I end up pushing off the front a little bit. You see I'm doing 4.5 watts per kilogram there, drop down to 4. And it really was just because I came through the group and I figured I might as well keep my momentum going and just kind of pull a little bit harder. You see the British Army cyclist pull up behind me, which I always throw a shout out to those guys when I see them. As a military member myself, being in the Marines, in the U.S. Marines, that I always like to see other branches of services out there, especially if they're foreign branches. I did work with coalition forces overseas, so I always respect those military members from different countries when I see them in the world of Zwift. And so as you can see, there's a guy off the front right now, stretching the group a little bit, but not too much. We're just, at this point, we are kind of holding together. But like I was saying, I feel like on the downhills, and you'll see this more. I'll show it again as we get to the next one. I'm 2 meters off the back, just trying to do my best to kind of stay at the back of this group, and close enough to where I'm getting a good draft, but not so far that I end up getting dropped. Because at these speeds, we're granted we're only doing 30 something kilometers an hour now, but as you see, we'll start to speed up as we hit the downhill. And there you go, you see me doing another 4 watts per kilogram just to latch back on, because at this point I'm worried that I'm gonna keep getting dropped on these hills. As we go down the hill, I'm gonna keep getting dropped, and definitely don't want that to happen, because like I started saying, we'll hit 40 something kilometers an hour easily on the flats. And if you're far enough off the group, if you're 4 or 5 meters off the group, you're probably not going to catch back on. You're probably not going to latch back on. So here you go. And so as we hit the sprint hill, we're starting to, push up. And this is where I honestly thought the group would start to split here. Small group. Zwift says we have 18 riders. Sauce says we have 13 in our group. A couple people, I guess, never made it out the pen or, fell behind. But as you can see, we're doing 4 or 5 watts up this short little climb. And that's just me trying to hold on. Now, this is where, I'm starting to look at kind of how my numbers are working in terms of my ZRS and my Zwift Racing app score, my eVelo score or VELO score. Um, Starting to see how it's working, and I really do feel like, you know, the groups that we're riding right now are strong riders. They're great riders, but I feel like there are strong riders that aren't on Zwift right now. Much stronger riders that aren't on Zwift right now. But I'm saving that for a later video because I wanted to give a little bit more in-depth breakdown. But like I said before, I thought the group would have split up here, but it didn't happen. And so now jumping way forward to the next, essentially downhill again, you'll see that on the downhill, I'm in gear, I'm in gear 11, pushing, trying to get onto the, stay on the group. Now, the second lap did start off a little bit slower. You see me get into the super tuck for a split second. I was actually kind of shocked that I hit the super tuck there. I didn't realize we were going that fast down that hill, although I know, I've gone, I think, like 70, 80 kilometers an hour down that hill with a good sprint beforehand. You can really fly down that hill. And so as we get to the base of, this climb, we are, we're starting to, you see the group starting to kind of split quite a bit. See, I'm, above 4 watts per kilogram again, so my camera changes. I make the mistake of steering out into the wind. And so if you have steering and your camera changes, I hope you know that your camera direction, what direction you're looking at, because you don't want to do what I just did and steer out into the wind when you don't need to. You see flames coming out of everywhere, and so I'm hitting 6 watts per kilogram just to keep up. It's not even to to put the pressure on the group. You can see there's 2 guys off the front right now, got a good margin, third and fourth kind of pushing there, people using their feathers. I've got my draft van, which I decided not to obviously use at this moment because I'm not going to get much of a benefit of the draft van going up the hill. But you see I'm still doing 5 watts per kilogram out of the saddle, going into the 6s just to stay on the back of this group. That is how hard these guys are going. Now, that is a big difference between what I'm used to in the lower categories, in the, up to 510, 530 categories versus in this, 510 to 650 category. Some of these riders, especially the guys that are in the upper 5s and 600s, these are some strong guys. And you can see there's one guy way off the front. He's already got 5 seconds on the group. And so as we start to go down this hill, I'm shifting up into gear 15, trying my best to stay on. I used my draft my draft bus as I crested over the hill, so that way I can at least stay latched onto this group. But you see right now we got basically a 3-way split. You got a small group of 7 in the front, you got another group of 5, and then me and Team NP that are stuck together. And chapeau to that guy for Team Not Pogi. Great group, great guys. And so they are, he and I were kind of, doing our best to pull each other forward. We get into this, group of 5. And at this point, I'm pushing through because I see the group of 7's not that far in front. They've got 6-7 seconds on us right now. But I know I can bridge that gap, especially as we're climbing this hill. One of the things I noticed, and again, this is the kind of stuff that I'm looking at while I'm racing and I'm thinking about later on, especially on these lap races, is how people are performing on these scenarios. So as we hit these hills, the group would always slow down, and so that gave me the ability to, to kind of anticipate that with this. And so you see a couple more guys past me. I use their draft to, keep my momentum and kind of stay on their wheel. And we're basically playing hopscotch at this point, trying to catch back onto this group. And so you see the, a couple riders pushed up there a little bit, a few meters off the front of me. I start pushing into the 4 watts again so I can catch back up. And you see me and the couple guys behind me are being, pulled forward. Because again, that's the, that's the camera view. That's the goal with with that overlay. And so right now we've got 4 seconds on the group. And, again, like I said before, the group, Fortunately, they slowed down as we were climbing this, this ramp up in the, in the middle of Central Park. And so as we start to, get closer and closer, we got 3 seconds on the group right now. We're just, sort of doing a team time trial, not pushing super, super hard. But you see the guys off the front pushing, doing a little bit more work. And again, as we hit this hill, that front group starts to slow down. And so you see we've got 3 seconds, they've got 3 seconds on us right now, but you see that quickly come down to 2 seconds. And again, pushing one more time so that way we can latch back onto that group. Because right now we've got about 4 kilometers left to go. And I know that if I can get into this front group, it shows us, Sauce shows us right now as a group of 11, which means we're basically all together. But if we don't keep on our effort, we're still 2 seconds behind them. All of this could easily fall apart if we don't continue to push our effort. So as we go downhill one more time, the pace starts to pick up once again. You see the guy on the Tron bike on the front, kind of pulling forward. I start to, I shift gear up into gear 18, put the power down so that way I can use my momentum to get back into this front group. And I finally latch back on with 3.6K to go. I end up pushing off the front a little bit, but that's just my sheer momentum. You see Team NP right behind me, which again, I was glad that he kind of stuck to my wheel because again, great group of riders. And so it's always fun to have, fellow known teammates, on the road, even though, I don't know him specifically, but I know the team, I know what they're capable of. Great group of guys. So as we all come back together, there's a couple people that got left behind, but right now it's a group of 11 that ultimately is going to contend for this final sprint. And so as we start to make our way to the New York City Sprint, or the New York Sprint, you see the group is starting to speed up just a little bit, 45 kilometers an hour right now as we hit the base of the climb. And, again, as we start to hit this climb up to the sprint, which is my least favorite because I lose so much momentum here on this whenever I have to do this for FRR as a sprint segment. I lose a lot of momentum here. And so as we hit this, this 6% climb, you see I'm off the back. I'm doing, 6.2 watts per kilogram, 500 and something, watts. And I'm not even moving forward in the group. Like, that's how prepared this group was to, go as hard as they can to take it to the end. But ultimately, we all do stay together at this moment. So as we hit the 1K to go, kind of wish there was a banner for that, but there isn't. So as we hit the 1K to go, we are right now just kind of staying together. We start to hit this little bit of a downhill. And as you can see, I'm slowly falling off the back once again. Like I said before, I feel like the guys with the Tron bikes basically are falling forward faster, which is pulling the group faster, which for someone like me who's on a bike that isn't as heavy as the Tron bike, my SL8 is at level 5 with the NB wheels, NB 89s, which are heavier wheels, but not as heavy as I guess the Tron bike would be, or any disc wheels. The momentum is kind of pulling everybody forward and away from me, which is really why I did not want the NB78. So you see I launched my power up there, my draft bus off the back, which is where I want it to be. I want it to be off the back of the group. Start sprinting, get into the 800 watts pretty quickly, and start to pass through this group little by little. And you see everybody else start to light up their power-ups as best as possible. You see a couple guys come up behind me and really start to put on the power. You see Miguel start to pass me there, and I'm doing my best to, shift into the right gear to go up this climb. And you see a second rider come up past me, and at that point, once I saw he passed me, I was like, all right, I know, I'm satisfied with third place. I knew nobody else was going to come up behind me. Man, oh man, what I didn't realize at the time, but I noticed it after I ended the race, is that I ended up taking the lap jersey for the Park Perimeter Loop, which I'm very excited about because I have not gotten that jersey as of yet. Now, I don't know. So looking at the numbers after the fact, I believe you get the jersey when you get a new PR versus me being the fastest on this loop. Obviously, I wouldn't have been the fastest on the loop, but then again, I don't know. I'd have to, know everybody's positions at the start of the lap versus the end of the lap. And so there you go. So came across the sprint in 11 seconds apparently, but I got the orange jersey. So excited about that. Got third place. Podium once again in New York in Central Park. And again, off of a longer range attack. And that's kind of, again, like I said last video, I'm going to keep doing it until people are able to stop me from doing it. And so that is the goal. If you can launch before me and prevent me from getting to, getting a podium off of a long range attack, which 700 meters, I think it was 600 meters ish when I started the attack. Not very far, compared to some of my longer sprints, 800 meters. But like I said, I'm going to keep doing it until I can't. So there you go. Appreciate you guys, and I will catch you on the next race. Hey guys, it's Miguel from That Thing You Just Watched. Hope you enjoyed that video, whether it was topic on nutrition or racing or a combination of both. Feel free to come back. I will continue to put out videos like this and continue to showcase what you can do with smart nutritional strategies, combining that with racing, because that is what this channel is all about. And feel free to check in if you want to see more racing. Click on wherever the link's at, subscribe, and I will catch you guys on the next race.